Kindness is always rewarded. That's what Kimberly's grandmother used to whisper, as she tucked her in each night, her weathered fingers smoothing back dark hair that never quite stayed in place. But when you're branded a freak by your own pack, when your very existence is seen as nature's cruel joke, you learn that some acts of mercy come with a price too dangerous to pay. Kimberly Moreau pressed her back against the rough bark of the ancient oak, watching through the kitchen window as her pack family prepared for tonight's ceremony. The full moon hung heavy and expectant above the pine tops, calling to every wolf in Shadow Haven pack, every wolf except her. 22 years of life, and not once had Kimberly felt the burn of transformation in her bones. Not once had she experienced the euphoric release of letting her wolf free under Luna's silver light. She was broken, cursed, the wolfless daughter, who brought shame to a bloodline that could trace its roots back 3 centuries. Kimberly, Luna Margaret's voice cut through the evening air like a blade. These dishes won't wash themselves. Kimberly's heart clenched as she watched Sophia glide past the window, her golden hair cascading in perfect waves down her back. At 19, Sophia had already shifted into the most magnificent silver-white wolf anyone had seen in generations. She was everything Kimberly wasn't: powerful, beautiful, destined for greatness. Tonight, she would likely receive Alpha Marcus's son's proposal, securing her place as future Luna. Kimberly pushed through the back door, her bare feet silent on the worn wooden floors. Margaret didn't even glance up from where she was arranging ceremonial candles, each one representing a pack member's wolf spirit. Kimberly noticed there was no candle for her. "Make sure you stay inside tonight," Margaret said, her voice carrying that familiar note of barely concealed disgust. "The last thing we need is for visiting packs to see our deficiency." The words hit Kimberly like physical blows, but she'd learned long ago not to flinch. Instead, she focused on the warmth spreading through her palms, a strange tingling that always came when emotions ran too high. She'd never told anyone about it, this odd sensation that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Sophia breezed into the kitchen, resplendent in her ceremonial dress. "Don't embarrass us at the ceremony, Kimberly. Being wolfless is burden enough without you drawing attention to yourself." Kimberly's throat tightened. "I won't be at the ceremony." "Good." Sophia's smile was sharp as winter frost. "Maybe if you're lucky, someone will mistake you for human help." As her sister swept away in a cloud of expensive perfume, Kimberly gripped the edge of the sink until her knuckles went white. The tingling in her hands grew stronger, almost urgent, as if something inside her was trying to claw its way free. But what could someone like her possibly have trapped inside? She was nothing. No wolf, no power, no future, just Kimberly, the pack's greatest disappointment. If you're feeling Kimberly's pain right now, if you've ever been the outsider looking in, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments. This story is just beginning, and Kimberly's journey is going to shatter everything you think you know about strength. Chapter 1. The Discovery. The ceremony drums echoed through the forest, their primal rhythm calling to every wolf for miles. Kimberly stood at her bedroom window, watching the last pack members disappear into the tree line, their excited voices fading into the night. Soon the air would fill with howls of joy as they embraced their true forms under the full moon's blessing. She couldn't bear to listen. Wrapping her grandmother's old shawl around her shoulders, Kimberly slipped out the back door. If she couldn't join the celebration, at least she could escape the suffocating emptiness of the house. Her feet carried her toward the forbidden section of Shadow Haven territory, the ancient part of the forest where pack members were warned never to venture alone. But what did it matter? What could happen to someone who was already nothing? The moonlight filtered through the canopy in silver streams, casting everything in an ethereal glow. Kimberly's breath misted in the cool air, as she walked deeper into territory she'd only glimpsed from a distance. Here, the trees were older, their trunks thick with moss and secrets. The very air seemed to hum with ancient energy. A sound stopped her cold, a weak, desperate whimpering that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Following the sound deeper into the underbrush, Kimberly pushed through a tangle of thorns that caught at her shawl and drew thin lines of blood along her arms. The whimpering grew stronger, more urgent. Then she saw them. 3 wolf pups, no more than a few weeks old, trapped in what looked like a cruel mockery of a hunter's snare. The metal wire had been twisted around their tiny bodies, with deliberate malice, designed not to kill quickly, but to cause maximum suffering. Their eyes were glassy with pain, and approaching death, their small bodies barely moving. Kimberly's heart shattered. Without thinking, she dropped to her knees beside them, her hands hovering over their broken forms. The tingling sensation in her palms flared to life, stronger than she'd ever felt it. "Hey, little ones," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You're safe now." The moment her skin touched the first pup's matted fur, the world exploded into sensation. Power flowed from Kimberly's hands like liquid silver, warm and pure and ancient. The metal wire dissolved under her touch, and she watched in amazement as the pup's wounds began to close, its breathing deepening from desperate gasps to steady rhythm. The second pup responded even faster, its eyes brightening as life flooded back into its small body. But the third, the smallest, lay still as death, its heartbeat so faint Kimberly could barely sense it. "No," she breathed, gathering the tiny creature against her chest. "Please, don't give up." She poured everything she had into that touch, feeling something deep inside her chest crack open like a floodgate. The power that rushed out left her dizzy and weak, but the pup's eyes fluttered open, its tiny tongue licking her fingers with renewed strength. 3 miracles, 3 lives saved by hands that everyone said were worthless. Kimberly sat back on her heels, staring at her palms in wonder. They looked the same, pale, unmarkable, human, but she could still feel the echo of that incredible power, like lightning captured in her bones. A branch snapped behind her. Kimberly spun around, clutching the recovered pups to her chest, and found herself staring into the shadows between 2 massive pines. Something moved there, something far too large to be human. "Who's there?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper. The shadows shifted, and a presence stepped forward that made Kimberly's breath catch in her throat. Even in human form, he was magnificent, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that caught moonlight like spun silver, and eyes so pale they seemed to glow. But it wasn't his physical presence that made Kimberly's knees weak. It was the power that rolled off him in waves, ancient, deadly, absolute. This was no ordinary pack member. "Interesting," the stranger said, his voice carrying an accent Kimberly couldn't place. "Very interesting indeed." The pups in her arms stirred, and to Kimberly's shock, they began wiggling toward the mysterious man, their tiny tails wagging with recognition. Fear and confusion warred in Kimberly's chest as the man took another step closer, his pale eyes never leaving her face. "Tell me, little healer," he said, and there was something in his tone that made Kimberly's blood run cold with both terror and inexplicable excitement. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" Chapter 2. The Alpha King's Judgment. The moonlight seemed to bend around him as he moved, and Kimberly realized with growing horror that she was face to face with a legend. Alpha King Kieran Blackthorn, the most feared werewolf in all of North America. The man whose very name made pack leaders bow their heads and warriors tremble. Kimberly's voice cracked. She tried to stand, tried to run, but her legs wouldn't support her. The power she'd used to heal the pups had left her drained and shaking. "I didn't know this was your territory." A smile curved Kieran's lips, but it held no warmth. "My territory extends far beyond what your little pack believes, child, but that's not why you should be afraid." He gestured to the pups, now crawling over Kimberly's lap, their small bodies vibrant with health. "Those are my nephews." Kimberly's blood turned to ice. The heirs to the Moonridge pack, Shadow Haven's most powerful neighbor. She remembered now, the hunting party that had gone missing 3 days ago, the whispered rumors of rogues and violence. "They were dying," she whispered. "I couldn't just leave them." "No," Kieran agreed, crouching down until he was at eye level with her. This close, Kimberly could see flecks of gold in his pale irises, could smell the intoxicating scent of pine and winter storms that clung to his skin. Most couldn't. Most would lack both the power and the compassion to save them. He reached out slowly, giving Kimberly time to pull away. When she couldn't, his fingers brushed her cheek. His touch was surprisingly gentle for someone with a reputation for ruthless violence. "What are you?" he asked softly. "Nothing," Kimberly breathed, the word automatic, after years of conditioning. "I'm wolfless. Broken. I don't even know why I could." "Stop." The command in his voice was absolute. "Don't you ever call yourself nothing again." His hand moved to cup her face, thumb brushing away tears Kimberly didn't realize had fallen. "Do you know what happened to the healers who tried to save my nephews at the Moonridge compound? 3 of our most powerful medicine women poured their strength into these pups for 2 days straight. They couldn't even stabilize their heartbeats." Kimberly stared at him, afraid to hope, afraid to believe what he seemed to be telling her. "You," Kieran continued, his voice dropping to an almost reverent whisper, "brought them back from death's door with a single touch. You gave them life when everyone else had given up." The largest pup, a beautiful golden creature that would grow into a magnificent wolf, stumbled over to Kieran and yapped imperiously. The sound was so normal, so alive, that Kimberly felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. "Uncle Kieran," the pup seemed to be saying, though Kimberly knew that was impossible. Pups this young couldn't shift to human form, couldn't speak. But Kieran seemed to understand perfectly. He scooped up the golden pup, his stern expression softening into something almost tender. "Yes, little prince, she saved you. She saved all of you." He looked back at Kimberly, and now there was something in his gaze that made her stomach flutter with nervous energy. Which brings me to an interesting dilemma. What do I do with a healer who shouldn't exist? "Please," Kimberly whispered. "I'll do anything. I'll never come here again. I'll never tell anyone what happened." Foolish child. But there was no anger in his voice. "You think I would harm someone who gave me back my family?" He stood in one fluid motion, the pups somehow sensing they should return to Kimberly's lap. She watched in fascination as they arranged themselves around her like tiny guardians. "You will come with me," Kieran said. And it wasn't a request. There are questions that need answering, powers that need understanding, and frankly, little healer, I don't think you're safe in that pack of yours. Kimberly's heart hammered against her ribs. "I can't just leave. My grandmother will be told you're under my protection." His smile this time held genuine warmth. "And Kimberly, that's not a lie. From this moment forward, you are under my protection. Anyone who wishes you harm will have to go through me first." The promise hung in the air between them, solid as steel and twice as unbreakable. Kimberly looked down at the 3 perfect pups in her lap, their bright eyes reflecting moonlight like tiny stars. For the first time in her life, someone was looking at her not as a burden, but as a miracle. "What happens now?" she asked. Kieran extended his hand, and Kimberly found herself reaching for it without hesitation. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong and utterly certain. "Now," he said, "we find out exactly what you are, Kimberly Moreau, and I suspect the answer is going to change everything." Chapter 3. The Impossible Choice. The Blackthorn stronghold rose from the mountainside like something out of a dream, all soaring towers in ancient stone, windows that glowed with warm amber light against the star-filled sky. Kimberly had heard whispers of its beauty, but seeing it firsthand stole what little breath she had left. Kieran's beta, a stern-faced man named Vincent, met them at the massive front doors. His eyes widened when he saw the 3 healthy pups tumbling around Kimberly's feet, but he said nothing. Kimberly was beginning to understand that very little surprised those in Kieran's inner circle. "Prepare the moon tower," Kieran instructed. "Our guest will need somewhere quiet to rest and recover." "The moon tower?" Vincent's eyebrows shot up. "Alpha, that's reserved for those under my personal protection," Kieran finished smoothly. "Which Kimberly most certainly is." Kimberly felt heat climb her cheeks. The way Kieran spoke her name, with that slight roughness that suggested things she didn't dare examine too closely, made her stomach flutter with dangerous awareness. The next few hours passed, in a blur of luxury Kimberly had never experienced. The Moon Tower was a circular room at the very top of the stronghold, its walls lined with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the surrounding forest. A fire crackled in the ornate fireplace, and thick rugs covered floors made of polished dark wood. Kimberly had barely settled onto the impossibly soft bed when a soft knock came at her door. She expected Vincent, or perhaps a servant, but it was Kieran who entered, carrying a tea service and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. "There's something you need to see," he said without preamble, setting the tray on a small table by the windows. He produced an ancient leather journal from inside his jacket, its pages yellowed with age. "This belonged to my grandmother, and her grandmother before her. It's a record of our pack's history going back nearly 400 years. Kimberly accepted the journal with trembling hands, afraid she might damage something so obviously precious. But when Kieran gestured for her to open it, she found herself staring at a hand-drawn illustration that made her heart stop. It showed a woman with long dark hair and gentle eyes, her hands glowing with silver light as she knelt beside a wounded wolf. At the bottom of the page, written in faded ink, were the words Lydia Moreau, last of the Moon Healers, disappeared during the Great Purge, 1847. "Moreau?" Kimberly whispered, her finger tracing the name. "Your family name," Kieran finished. "Your great-great-grandmother, if I'm reading the bloodline correctly, the last known Moon Healer, until tonight." Kimberly's hands shook as she turned the page, finding more illustrations, more stories. Women who could heal with a touch, who could speak to wild creatures, who could channel the moon's own power through their mortal bodies. "We thought the bloodline was extinct," Kieran said softly. "The Great Purge wiped out most of the old magical lines. But somehow, your ancestor survived. Somehow, the gift passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment to resurface." "But I'm wolfless," Kimberly protested weakly. "How can I be something so powerful when I can't even shift?" Kieran moved to sit beside her on the bed, his presence warm and reassuring. "Because Moon Healers aren't werewolves, Kimberly. They're something older, something rarer. They're the bridge between our world and the ancient magic that created us." Before Kimberly could respond, commotion erupted in the courtyard below. Through the windows, she could see torches approaching through the forest. Lots of them. Kieran was at the window instantly, his body tense with alertness. "It seems your pack has come calling." Kimberly's blood ran cold as she recognized the figures emerging from the tree line. Luna Margaret led the procession, her face hard with fury, followed by Alpha Marcus and most of Shadowhaven's senior members. At the back of the group, looking miserable and ashamed, walked her grandmother. "They've come for me," Kimberly whispered. "Have they?" Kieran's voice carried a dangerous edge. "How interesting." 20 minutes later, Kimberly found herself in the Great Hall, seated at Kieran's right hand while her pack demanded her return. The throne-like chair should have made her feel ridiculous, but instead, she felt oddly at home in this place of power and ancient magic. "She's our pack member," Alpha Marcus was saying, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed. "We appreciate your hospitality, Alpha King, but Kimberly belongs with us." "Belongs with you?" Kieran's voice was silk over steel. "Tell me, Marcus, how exactly does one belong with those who treat her as less than human?" Luna Margaret stepped forward, her face twisted with false concern. "Kimberly is troubled. She has delusions about having special gifts. We've been trying to help her accept her limitations." "Limitations?" Kieran repeated the word, like it tasted foul. "How generous of you." Kimberly's grandmother finally spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, child. Come home. This isn't where you belong." The words hit Kimberly like a physical blow. Even now, even after everything, her own family couldn't see her worth. "Actually," Kieran said, rising from his throne with predatory grace, "I have a different proposition." He moved to stand behind Kimberly's chair, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders, in a gesture that was both protective and possessive. Kimberly's gifts are extraordinary, unprecedented. I'm offering her a place here, training with my court's most skilled teachers, a chance to develop her abilities to their full potential. Absolutely not, Margaret snapped. She's just a wolfless girl with delusions of grandeur. Whatever trick she pulled tonight. Trick? Kieran's power filled the room, pressing against everyone present until several pack members took involuntary steps backward. You call saving 3 lives a trick? He gestured, and Vincent entered carrying the golden pup Kimberly had healed first. The little creature looked around the room with bright, healthy eyes, its tail wagging as it spotted Kimberly. This is Prince Tobias of the Moonridge Pack, Kieran announced. 3 days ago he was dying from wounds that our best healers couldn't touch. Tonight, thanks to Kimberly's gift, he's completely healed. The pup yipped and bounded toward Kimberly, climbing into her lap with complete trust. As he settled against her chest, that familiar tingling began in Kimberly's palms. Choose, Kieran said, his pale eyes fixed on Kimberly with an intensity that made her shiver. Stay with me, and learn what you're truly capable of, or go back to a pack that sees your miracle as madness. Kimberly looked around the room, at Margaret's disgusted expression, at her grandmother's fearful pleading, at Alpha Marcus's barely concealed anger. Then she looked up at Kieran, at the promise of acceptance and power and belonging she saw in his ancient eyes. For the first time in her life, someone was offering her a choice, a real choice. I need time, she whispered. Kieran nodded. You have until the new moon. 3 days. As her pack filed out with expressions ranging from fury to disappointment, Kimberly remained in the great hall, the golden pup warm and trusting in her arms. 3 days to decide between the only family she'd ever known, and the possibility of becoming someone she'd never dreamed she could be. 3 days to choose between safety and destiny. The tension is killing me, and I know it's killing you too. Will Kimberly find the courage to claim her true power? Make sure you're subscribed because you won't want to miss what happens next. And tell me in the comments, what would you choose? The familiar pain of rejection, or the terrifying possibility of becoming everything you were meant to be? Chapter 4. The Test of Loyalty. Training began at dawn. Kimberly stood in the center of a circular room deep within the stronghold, her bare feet grounding her to the cold stone floor. Around her, symbols had been carved into the walls, ancient markings that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The air itself felt charged with magic. Focus, instructed Sage Alara, an elderly woman whose silver hair seemed to float around her face like morning mist. Feel the power in your core. Don't force it, invite it. For 3 hours, Kimberly had been trying to summon that incredible healing energy she'd felt in the forest. For 3 hours, she'd produced nothing but a faint warmth in her palms and growing frustration in her chest. I can't, she gasped, sinking to her knees. Whatever I did before, I can't control it. Because you're thinking like a werewolf, Alara said gently. Moon healers don't dominate their power. They surrender to it. You must stop trying to contain the ocean, and instead learn to swim. Kimberly closed her eyes, trying to remember the desperate urgency she'd felt when the pups were dying, the complete lack of self-preservation that had allowed her to pour everything into saving them. This time, when the tingling began in her hands, she didn't try to direct it, she simply let it flow. Silver light erupted from her palms, so bright Alara had to shield her eyes, but with the power came something else, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that made Kimberly sway on her knees. Excellent, Alara exclaimed. But you see the price. Moon healing draws from your own life force. Each use weakens you. How much? Kimberly whispered, already dreading the answer. That depends on what you're healing. Small wounds, simple ailments, you'll recover quickly. But something like what you did for the princes. Alara's expression grew grave. That should have killed you. The fact that you survived suggests your power is far stronger than we initially thought. That afternoon, Kimberly found herself in the stronghold's main courtyard, surrounded by a crowd of curious pack members. Word of her abilities had spread, and everyone wanted to see the mysterious moon healer in action. Show them, Kieran commanded from his place on the raised platform. He looked magnificent in the afternoon sunlight, every inch the powerful Alpha King, but his eyes held an intensity that made Kimberly's pulse quicken. A warrior named Thomas approached, his arm wrapped in bloodied bandages from that morning's training. Nothing serious, he assured Kimberly, as she knelt beside him. Just want to see if the stories are true. Kimberly unwrapped the bandages to reveal a deep gash along his forearm, exactly the kind of wound that would normally take weeks to heal properly. She pressed her palms against the torn flesh and called to her power. The silver light came easier this time, flowing from her hands into Thomas's arm. She watched in amazement as the wound began to close, the torn muscles knitting themselves back together. But this time, she felt the cost more acutely. Dizziness washed over her, and she had to brace herself against Thomas's shoulder to keep from falling. Incredible, someone whispered. Impossible, added another voice. Kimberly looked up to find Kieran studying her with an unreadable expression. There was pride there. Yes, but also something that looked almost like concern. That evening, as Kimberly sat in her tower room trying to regain her strength, an unexpected visitor arrived. "May I come in?" Sophia asked from the doorway, looking nothing like the confident pack princess Kimberly remembered. Instead, she seemed small and uncertain. Her usual perfect composure cracked around the edges. Kimberly gestured to the chair by the fireplace, too tired to summon proper wariness. "What do you want, Sophia?" "To apologize." The words came out in a rush, "and to warn you." Kimberly raised an eyebrow, genuinely surprised. In 22 years, Sophia had never apologized for anything. "Mother is furious," Sophia continued, wrapping her arms around herself. "She's been sending messages to other packs, spreading rumors about you using dark magic to seduce the Alpha King. She's convinced you're some kind of threat to the natural order." "And what do you think?" Kimberly asked quietly. Sophia was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "I think I've been jealous of you my entire life." Kimberly nearly choked on her tea. "Jealous? Of me?" "You never needed anyone's approval," Sophia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when Mother was cruel, even when the pack treated you like an outcast, you never changed who you were. You never tried to make yourself smaller to fit into their expectations." She looked up at Kimberly with tears in her eyes. "I've spent my whole life being perfect, being what everyone wanted me to be. But you were always just Kimberly, and somehow, that was enough." Kimberly felt her own eyes well up. "Sophia, there's more." Sophia's voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "Mother received a message today. There's been an attack on our territory. Rogues, moving in a coordinated pack. People are hurt, Kimberly, badly hurt. The pack healers can't handle it alone." Kimberly's blood ran cold. "How bad?" 7 critically injured, 3 children among them. Sophia reached out and grasped Kimberly's hands. "They need you, but Mother has forbidden anyone from asking for your help. She'd rather let them die than admit she was wrong about you." The room fell silent, except for the crackling of the fire. Kimberly stared at her sister who had tormented her for years, but was now risking everything to save their packmates. "There's something else," Sophia whispered. "The attack wasn't random. Someone gave the rogues information about our patrol schedules, our weak points. Someone in our pack betrayed us." Kimberly's heart hammered against her ribs. "I don't know. But whoever it is, they're still there, still in a position to do more damage." A soft knock interrupted them. Kieran entered without waiting for permission, his expression darkening when he saw Sophia. "Your pack's beta is here," he told Kimberly, requesting immediate sanctuary for their wounded. Kimberly looked between Kieran and Sophia, understanding the weight of the moment. This was it, her first real test, not of her power, but of her loyalty. "What are you going to do?" Kieran asked, but his tone suggested he already knew. Kimberly stood on unsteady legs, her body still weak from the day's training. "I'm going to save them. All of them. Even knowing it could kill you?" Kieran's voice was deadly quiet, especially knowing that. For a heartbeat, Kieran simply stared at her. Then his mouth curved in a smile that was equal parts pride and exasperation. Then we'd better make sure you survive it. Chapter 5. The Ultimate Betrayal. The Shadowhaven wounded had been arranged in the Stronghold's Great Hall, their broken bodies a testament to the rogue's vicious efficiency. Kimberly moved between them like a ghost, her healing light flowing from patient to patient, until she could barely stand. 5 were stable now. The 6th, a teenage boy named Marcus, had internal injuries so severe that Kimberly's power seemed to slide off them like water off glass. "I can't," she gasped, collapsing beside the boy's still form. "There's something wrong. It's like there's poison in his system." Kieran knelt beside her, his hand steady on her back. "Rest. You've already saved 5 lives today." Not enough. Kimberly tried to summon her power again, but only managed a weak flicker. "He's going to die because I'm not strong enough." "No," said a cold voice from the hall's entrance. "He's going to die because you're exactly what I said you were. A dangerous fraud." Luna Margaret strode into the hall, flanked by 2 pack warriors Kimberly didn't recognize. Her face was a mask of righteous fury, but something in her eyes made Kimberly's blood run cold. "I warned them this would happen," Margaret continued, her voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall. "I told them that dark magic always demands payment in innocent blood." "Mother, stop," Sophia pleaded, but Margaret ignored her. "Do you know what young Marcus was doing when the rogues found him?" Margaret asked, her smile sharp as a blade. "He was trying to protect 3 wolf pups he'd found abandoned in the forest. Sound familiar?" Kimberly's heart stopped. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Margaret replied, pulling a small vial from her robes, "that your so-called healing comes with a price. Every life you save creates a wound in the natural order, and that wound attracts darkness, like a beacon." The vial in her hand contained a thick, black substance that seemed to move with its own malevolent life. "This is what I found in the forest where my son was attacked," Margaret announced. "Residual dark magic. The same signature that's been clinging to you since the night you supposedly saved those princes." "That's impossible," Kieran snarled, but Kimberly could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. Margaret's smile widened. "Is it? Tell me, Kimberly. How did you know exactly where to find the princes? How did you know they needed help?" Kimberly's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, because the truth was, she didn't know. She'd followed the sound of their cries, but now that she thought about it, "The voices," she whispered. "I heard them calling for help. From 3 pups too young to mind-link." Margaret's voice dripped with false sympathy. "Oh, my dear child, don't you see what's been manipulating you?" She held up the vial, and the black substance inside pulsed like a living heart. "This is shadow essence. It feeds on death and despair, grows stronger with each life it claims, and it's been using you as its vessel." Kimberly stumbled backward, her hands shaking. "No, that's not. I saved them. I healed." "You marked them for death," Margaret said with terrible gentleness. "Every person you've touched with your power now carries a shadow taint, and sooner or later, that taint will call more darkness to finish what you started." Around the hall, the wounded began to stir uneasily. Some sat up, their eyes wide with fear, as they stared at Kimberly. "The boy is dying because of what you did to him," Margaret continued relentlessly. "Your power didn't heal him, it marked him, and now the shadows are coming to collect." Kimberly looked around the hall desperately, seeking someone who would contradict Margaret's words. But even Kieran was staring at her with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "I don't believe you," Kimberly whispered. Margaret's expression shifted to one of mock pity. "Then prove me wrong. Use your power one more time. Save the boy. But know that if I'm right, if you truly are a conduit for shadow magic, then touching him again will kill him instantly." The silence in the hall was deafening. Kimberly stared down at Marcus's pale face, watching his chest rise and fall in increasingly shallow breaths. If Margaret was telling the truth, then everything Kimberly believed about herself was a lie, Every person she'd tried to help, she'd actually damned. But if Margaret was lying, Kimberly sank to her knees beside Marcus's bed, her hands hovering just above his still form. One touch would give her the answer. One touch would prove whether she was a healer or a monster. Kimberly, don't, Kieran said urgently. We need to investigate this first. There's no time, Kimberly replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. He's dying. She pressed her palms against Marcus's chest and called to her power one last time. The silver light that erupted from her hands was brighter than ever before, so pure it hurt to look at directly. It flowed into Marcus's broken body like liquid starlight, and Kimberly felt his injuries responding immediately. But this time, something else happened. The black substance in Margaret's vial began to smoke and writhe, as if Kimberly's light was causing it physical pain. Margaret's face went white, then red with rage. Impossible, she hissed. Marcus's eyes fluttered open, clear and bright, and completely free of any shadow taint. The essence, Sage Alara breathed from somewhere behind Kimberly. It's burning away in the presence of true moon magic. Kimberly looked up at Margaret with new understanding. You're the traitor. You gave the rogues our patrol schedules. Margaret's mask finally slipped, revealing the twisted hatred beneath. You think you're so special, don't you? The long-lost moon healer, destined for greatness. But I remember the old stories. I know what your kind really are. She threw the vial at Kimberly's feet, where it shattered and released a cloud of acrid black smoke. Moon healers aren't saviors. They're weapons. And like all weapons, they can be turned against their wielders. The smoke began to take shape, forming into something that might have once been human, but was now a creature of pure malevolence. Its eyes burned with hatred, as old as the moon itself. I bound this shadow wraith 20 years ago, Margaret snarled, kept it fed on small cruelties and pack discord. But it was always meant for you, dear stepdaughter. A weapon to destroy the weapon. The creature lunged at Kimberly with claws made of crystallized darkness. But before it could reach her, Kieran was there, his massive wolf form erupting from his human skin in a transformation so violent it shook the stone walls. His midnight black fur seemed to absorb light itself, and his eyes blazed with an otherworldly silver fire. The shadow wraith's claws raked across Kieran's shoulder, leaving wounds that steamed and hissed, but he didn't retreat. Instead, he planted himself between Kimberly and the creature, his growl reverberating through the hall like thunder. You want her? His voice echoed in Kimberly's mind through the Alpha's mental link. You'll have to go through me first. Kimberly struggled to her feet, her body screaming in protest after healing 6 critical patients. Around the hall, chaos erupted as Kieran's warriors shifted to defend their Alpha King, but their claws and teeth passed harmlessly through the wraith's smoky form. Physical attacks won't work, Alara called out, her ancient voice cutting through the noise. Only moon magic can destroy shadow essence. Kimberly looked at her hands, at the fading silver light that had saved so many lives. She'd given everything she had to heal Marcus. There was nothing left. I can't, she gasped. I'm too weak. Margaret laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Did you really think it would be that easy? That you could just wish away 20 years of careful planning? The wraith circled Kieran with predatory patience, looking for an opening. Where its feet touched the stone floor, the rock cracked and blackened. You see, dear Kimberly, Margaret continued, her voice taking on the tone of a teacher, delivering a lesson. Shadow magic isn't the opposite of moon magic. It's moon magic corrupted, twisted into something that feeds on pain instead of healing it. Kimberly's blood went cold. You're saying? I'm saying you could become exactly like that creature if you're not careful. Every moon healer who's ever lived has faced the same choice: save others and risk losing yourself, or preserve your own soul and let the world burn. The wraith suddenly broke its circling pattern, lunging not at Kieran, but at the wounded pack members, still lying vulnerable on their beds. Kieran spun to intercept, but he was too far away. Without thinking, Kimberly threw herself forward, her hands coming up instinctively. The last dregs of her power flowed out in a desperate barrier of silver light. The wraith hit her shield and recoiled with a shriek that made everyone in the hall clap their hands over their ears. But Kimberly's barrier flickered and died almost immediately, leaving her defenseless. Touching, Margaret sneered. But ultimately futile. You've delayed the inevitable by seconds. The wraith gathered itself for another attack, its form growing more solid and menacing. Kimberly closed her eyes, preparing for pain that would make everything she'd endured seem like a gentle caress. Instead, she felt warmth. Opening her eyes, she found herself surrounded by silver light, but not her own. Kieran had somehow shifted back to human form and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his own power flowing through her like liquid fire. "How are you?" Kimberly started to ask. "Alpha Kings aren't just werewolves," Kieran murmured against her ear. "We're touched by the same ancient magic that created moon healers. We're meant to be partners, not just mates." His power merged with hers, creating something entirely new. Where Kimberly's magic was gentle and healing, Kieran's was fierce and protective. Together they formed something that made the wraith actually take a step backward. "Impossible," Margaret breathed. "The bonding ritual hasn't been completed. You can't share power without a mating bond?" Kieran's smile was sharp as winter wind. "Perhaps you should have done more research before attempting to murder my mate." Kimberly's heart skipped several beats at the word mate, but there was no time to process what he meant. The combined power flowing through them was incredible, but she could feel it burning through her system like wildfire. "I can't control this much energy," she gasped. "You don't have to control it," Kieran replied, his voice steady despite the strain she could see in his face. "Just aim it." Kimberly looked at the wraith, at Margaret's shocked expression, at the innocent people still in danger. Then she stopped trying to contain the ocean and learned to swim. Silver-white light exploded from their joined hands, pure and clean and absolutely devastating. It washed over the shadow wraith like a cleansing tide, and Kimberly watched in amazement as the creature began to dissolve. But instead of disappearing entirely, the darkness flowed backward toward its source. Margaret screamed as 20 years of accumulated shadow magic slammed back into her body, her carefully maintained illusion of righteousness burning away like morning mist. When the light faded, Margaret was no longer the composed Luna Kimberly remembered. Her hair had gone completely white, her face was lined with new wrinkles, and her eyes held the desperate look of someone who had just realized the true cost of their choices. 20 years, she whispered, staring at her aged hands. 20 years of my life, feeding that thing. And for what? For jealousy, Kimberly said quietly, surprised by the pity in her own voice. Because you couldn't bear that a wolfless girl might be worth something after all. Margaret laughed bitterly. Worth something? Child, do you have any idea what you are? She gestured weakly at the scorch marks on the stone floor where the wraith had died. That display of power should have killed both of you. The fact that you're still standing means you're not just any moon healer. You're the Moonborn, the one the prophecies spoke of. Kimberly felt Kieran's arms tighten around her protectively. What prophecies? Margaret's smile held no warmth, only the cruel satisfaction of someone delivering a final blow. The one that says the last Moonborn will either heal the rift between the human and supernatural worlds, or destroy them both in the attempt. She looked directly at Kimberly, her aged eyes holding a terrible certainty, and the prophecy is very clear about one thing. The Moonborn cannot achieve her destiny without first losing everything she holds dear. Before anyone could respond, Margaret pulled a small silver blade from her robes and drew it across her own throat in one quick motion. Kimberly lunged forward instinctively, her healing power flaring to life, but Kieran caught her wrist. Don't, he said softly. Some wounds aren't meant to be healed. Margaret died with that cruel smile still on her lips, taking with her any remaining answers about Kimberly's true nature and the dangers that might lie ahead. In the terrible silence that followed, Kimberly became aware of eyes watching her from every corner of the hall, pack members from Shadowhaven and Blackthorn alike, all staring at the woman who had just been declared both salvation and potential apocalypse. Well, Kieran said with forced lightness, that certainly escalated quickly. Despite everything, Kimberly found herself laughing, a sound that bordered on hysteria. Is this what being mated to an alpha king is like? Because I have to say, the recruitment materials were misleading. Kieran turned her in his arms, his pale eyes searching her face. Kimberly, about what I said earlier. You called me your mate, Kimberly interrupted, her cheeks burning with embarrassment, and something else she wasn't ready to name. I did. His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized had fallen. And I meant it. But I understand if you need time to. Kimberly silenced him by pressing her lips to his, pouring all her confusion and gratitude and growing love into the kiss. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Ask me again in 3 days, she whispered against his mouth, when this isn't all so overwhelming and I can think straight. Kieran's smile was soft and patient, and full of promises. I can wait. Around them, people began to move again, tending to the wounded and cleaning up the aftermath of Margaret's final betrayal. But Kimberly remained in Kieran's arms, finally understanding what it felt like to be exactly where she belonged. Even if prophecies and destiny were calling her toward an uncertain future, at least she wouldn't face it alone. Subscribe if you're as shaken as I am by that revelation. Margaret's gone, but the prophecy she revealed changes everything. What does it mean to be moonborn? And what price will Kimberly have to pay for her power? Don't forget to hit that notification bell, because the next chapter is going to reveal truths that will shatter everything Kimberly thought she knew about her destiny. Chapter 6. The Final Choice. 2 days had passed since Margaret's death, and the Blackthorn stronghold buzzed with attention that had nothing to do with the approaching new moon. Messengers arrived hourly with increasingly dire news, rogue packs moving toward Shadowhaven territory, demanding justice for their fallen leader. Other alphas choosing sides, some supporting Kieran's protection of Kimberly, others claiming she was too dangerous to live. Kimberly stood at the window of her tower room, watching the controlled chaos in the courtyard below. Warriors sharpened weapons, scouts departed on reconnaissance missions, and everyone moved with the grim efficiency of people preparing for war. Regrets? Kieran asked from the doorway, though his tone suggested he already knew her answer. Kimberly didn't turn around. About which part? Saving the princes? Healing your people? Or falling in love with you? She heard his sharp intake of breath. Kimberly. Because I don't regret any of it, she continued, finally facing him. Even knowing what it's cost, what it might still cost, I don't regret a single moment. Kieran crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms with desperate intensity. This is my fault. If I hadn't brought you here, then those children would be dead, Kimberly interrupted firmly. Margaret would still be poisoning my pack with her hatred, and I'd still be convinced I was worthless. You gave me the chance to become who I was always meant to be. Before Kieran could respond, urgent footsteps echoed up the tower stairs. Vincent appeared in the doorway, his face grim with news Kimberly already knew would change everything. Alpha, we have a problem. The Moonridge Pack is requesting immediate audience. Their Alpha claims Kimberly murdered his sons. Kimberly's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. I saved them. They were playing in the gardens just yesterday. They're gone, Vincent said quietly. All 3 princes, found dead in their beds this morning. No signs of violence, just empty. Like something drained the life right out of them. Kimberly's knees gave out. If not for Kieran's arms around her, she would have collapsed entirely. No, I healed them. I gave them life, not the shadow magic, Kieran said, understanding hitting him like a physical blow. Margaret said, your power marked them. What if she was telling the truth? Just not in the way we thought. Kimberly pulled away from him, horror flooding her system. You think I killed them? I think, Kieran said carefully, that Margaret may have found a way to corrupt your healing from a distance. The wraith she bound. What if its destruction didn't end the spell, but completed it? Kimberly sank into a chair, her mind reeling. 3 innocent lives, 3 beautiful children who had trusted her, played with her, looked at her like she was something wonderful. and now they were dead because of her. There's more, Vincent continued reluctantly. Word has spread to other packs. They're calling you the Death Healer now. They say anyone you touch is marked for shadow consumption. That's not true, Kimberly whispered. Isn't it? Vincent's tone was gentle but relentless. How many people did you heal yesterday? How many are we going to wake up to find dead tomorrow? Kimberly wrapped her arms around herself, trying to hold back the wave of panic threatening to drown her. If Vincent was right, if her healing really did mark people for death, then everyone in the stronghold was in danger. Everyone except you, she said suddenly, looking up at Kieran. I used your power yesterday. If my magic is corrupted, why aren't you dead? Kieran knelt beside her chair, his hands covering hers. Because true mates can't be corrupted by each other's magic. Our bond purifies whatever passes between us. Then that's the answer, Kimberly said, hope flickering in her chest. If I only heal people through our bond, if you channel my power. Kimberly, no. Kieran's voice was firm. That kind of power sharing, sustained over multiple healings, it would burn through both of us. We'd be dead within hours. Vincent cleared his throat uncomfortably. Alpha, there's one more thing. The Moonridge Pack isn't just demanding justice. They're offering a blood debt challenge. Kimberly had heard whispers of blood debt challenges in pack lore, ancient duels to the death that could only be invoked when crimes against children were involved. If accepted, the accused had to face the grieving parent in single combat, with no quarter given or expected. And if the challenge is refused? Kimberly asked, though she already knew. Then it becomes a matter of pack honor, Vincent replied. Every alpha in the region will be bound by ancient law to hunt you down. Kimberly stood slowly, her decision crystallizing with terrible clarity. Then I accept. Absolutely not, Kieran snarled, his power filling the room. I won't let you throw your life away for something that wasn't your fault. 3 children are dead. Because of me, Kimberly replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. If not my intent, then my ignorance. Either way, I bear responsibility. She moved to the window again, looking out at the forest where everything had begun. Besides, there's something else Margaret said, about me losing everything I hold dear, before I can fulfill my destiny. Maybe this is what she meant. No, Kieran's denial was absolute. I won't accept that. There has to be another way. Kimberly turned to face him, memorizing every detail of his beloved face. What if there isn't? What if the only way to save everyone else is for me to— Stop. Kieran's voice cracked with pain. Just stop. We'll figure this out together. That's what mates do. Kimberly smiled sadly. We're not mated yet, remember? You still have to ask me properly. Despite everything, Kieran's mouth curved in a small smile. Is that what this is about? You want a formal proposal? I want, Kimberly said softly, to know that if I don't survive tomorrow, you'll remember that someone loved you enough to die for the chance to keep you safe. Before Kieran could respond, Kimberly made her choice. She stepped forward, stood on her toes, and kissed him with all the passion and promise of a lifetime they might never have. Kimberly Moreau, Kieran said against her lips when they finally broke apart. Will you do me the honor of becoming my mate, my Luna, and my partner in all things? Yes, Kimberly whispered. For however long we have, yes. The mating bond snapped into place between them, like a chain of starlight, and Kimberly gasped at the sudden rush of sensation. She could feel Kieran's emotions, as if they were her own, his fierce love, his desperate fear, his unshakable determination to protect her. But she could also feel something else, a presence that had been lurking at the edges of her consciousness, waiting for just this moment of vulnerability. Margaret's voice echoed in her mind, cold and triumphant. Did you really think death would stop me, dear stepdaughter? Shadow magic feeds on despair, and you've just given me enough to work with for centuries. Kimberly jerked away from Kieran, horror flooding the newly formed bond between them. She's still here. Margaret, her magic is still alive, still connected to me. That's impossible, Kieran said, but Kimberly could see the doubt creeping into his eyes. Is it? She spent 20 years binding that wraith to her will. What if she bound herself to me the same way? Kimberly's voice rose with panic. What if every person I heal, every life I save, feeds more power back to her ghost? The terrible truth of it settled over the room like a shroud. Kimberly wasn't just potentially dangerous. She was actively being used as a weapon by a woman who hated her enough to return from the dead for revenge. There has to be a way to break the connection, Kieran said desperately. Kimberly looked at her mate, her beautiful, powerful, doomed mate, and felt her heart break cleanly in two. There is, she said quietly, but you're not going to like it. Chapter 7. The Transformation. The Blood Debt Challenge was set for dawn, in the ancient stone circle that marked the neutral ground between pack territories. Kimberly stood in the center of the ring, wearing the simple white dress that tradition demanded of the accused. Around the circle's perimeter, representatives from dozens of packs watched in tense silence. Alpha Garrett of the Moonridge pack was a massive man, his grief having transformed into a cold rage that radiated from him in waves. He'd chosen to fight in human form, wielding a silver blade blessed by his pack's eldest shaman. One cut would be enough to end Kimberly's life. You stand accused of the murder of 3 innocents, the pack elder officiating the challenge intoned. How do you answer? Kimberly looked across the circle at Garrett's hate-filled eyes and made her choice. A ripple of shock ran through the assembled crowd. By confessing, Kimberly had just signed her own death warrant. There would be no combat now, no chance for victory or escape, just execution. Kimberly, no. Kieran's voice carried across the circle, but she didn't look at him, couldn't look at him, or her resolve would crumble. I accept responsibility for their deaths, Kimberly continued, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. But before you pass sentence, there's something you need to know. Something about the woman who really killed your sons. She raised her hands, calling to the corrupted power that Margaret's ghost had been feeding through their connection. But instead of trying to resist it or channel it for healing, Kimberly embraced it fully. Shadow magic poured through her system like liquid fire, and Margaret's spirit materialized beside her, no longer able to remain hidden. What are you doing, you foolish child? Margaret hissed, her ghostly form writhing with fury. What I should have done days ago, Kimberly replied. I'm calling you out. Around the circle, gasps echoed as pack members realized they were looking at the true architect of the prince's deaths. Margaret's spirit form was twisted and grotesque, her features warped by decades of shadow magic consumption. You want to know how the princes really died? Kimberly called out, directing her words to Alpha Garrett. She drained their life force from a distance, using the connection she'd forged between my healing magic and her shadow essence. Every time I saved a life, I unknowingly gave her more power to steal others. Lies, Margaret shrieked. You're the monster here. You're the one who... Kimberly silenced her with a gesture, her newly understood power clamping down on the ghost's ability to speak. Tell them the truth, Margaret. Tell them how you spent 20 years planning this moment. How you were willing to sacrifice innocent children just to destroy me. The compulsion in Kimberly's voice was absolute, backed by power that even Margaret's corrupted spirit couldn't resist. The truth poured out of the ghost in a torrent of bitter confession. The years of careful planning, the shadow wraith binding, the deliberate corruption of Kimberly's healing magic. By the time Margaret finished speaking, Alpha Garrett's rage had shifted entirely to the ghost floating before him. He raised his blessed blade, but the silver passed harmlessly through Margaret's incorporeal form. You cannot hurt me with physical weapons, Margaret laughed, her voice echoing strangely now that Kimberly's compulsion had been lifted. I am beyond death, beyond pain. I am bound to me, Kimberly interrupted calmly, which means when I die, you die with me. Margaret's laughter cut off abruptly. What? Kimberly looked around the circle, meeting the eyes of every alpha present. Shadow magic requires an anchor in the living world. Margaret has been using me as that anchor for days now. If I destroy myself, I take her with me. Kimberly, don't you dare, Kieran snarled, moving toward the circle's edge. "It's the only way," Kimberly replied, her heart breaking at the anguish in his voice. "As long as I live, she can use my power to hurt innocent people. The only way to stop her permanently is to sever the anchor." She called more shadow magic to her hands, but this time she turned it inward. Pain beyond description flooded her system as the corrupted power began eating away at her life force from within. "You think you're being noble," Margaret sneered, even as her own form began to flicker and fade. "But you're forgetting the prophecy. The Moonborn is supposed to heal the rift between worlds. How can you do that if you're dead?" Kimberly smiled through the agony consuming her. "Who says I'm planning to stay dead?" She poured every ounce of her remaining power into one final, desperate gambit. Not shadow magic or moon healing, but something that combined both, a force that sought balance rather than domination. The explosion of silver and black light that erupted from her body was visible for miles. When it faded, both Kimberly and Margaret had vanished entirely, leaving only a circle of scorched earth and the echo of power that made every supernatural creature present tremble with recognition. For a long moment, silence reigned. Then Kieran threw back his head and howled a sound of loss so profound that it seemed to tear the very fabric of reality. He wasn't the only one. Across the circle, other wolves joined their voices to his, creating a symphony of grief that spoke to something primal and ancient in every heart present. But as the howling reached its crescendo, something impossible happened. Light began to gather in the center of the circle, not the harsh silver of moon magic or the consuming darkness of shadow essence, but something entirely new, a warm golden radiance that felt like sunrise after the longest night. The light condensed, grew brighter, took shape. Kimberly materialized in a flash of golden fire, but she was no longer entirely human. Silver-white fur covered her body, and her eyes held the ancient wisdom of both wolf and healer. She had found her wolf at last, not through transformation, but through sacrifice and rebirth. More than that, she had become something unprecedented, the first being to successfully merge moon and shadow magic without being corrupted by either. "The Moonborn," someone whispered in awed recognition. Kimberly looked around the circle with eyes that held depths of power no one present could fully comprehend. When her gaze found Kieran, she smiled, an expression that held all the love and promise of their bond. "Did you really think," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in everyone's bones, "that I would leave my mate without saying goodbye properly?" Kieran was across the circle and pulling her into his arms before anyone could blink. The kiss they shared sent ripples of pure joy through the mate bond, joy so intense that several pack members actually staggered from the emotional overflow. "How?" Kieran whispered against her lips. "Margaret was right. About one thing," Kimberly replied softly. "I did have to lose everything I held dear. My humanity, my limitations, my fear of my own power. But she was wrong about something else." Kimberly pulled back to look into Kieran's eyes, her love for him blazing like a beacon in the mate bond they shared. "She thought death would be the end of my story. But for a Moonborn, death is just another transformation." Around the circle, pack leaders who had come to witness an execution instead found themselves kneeling before something that hadn't existed in over 1,000 years, a true bridge between the human and supernatural worlds. The prophecy was fulfilled, but not in the way anyone had expected. Kimberly had indeed lost everything she held dear, but in losing it she had gained something infinitely more precious. The power to heal not just bodies, but the ancient wounds that divided their world. And the knowledge that true love really could conquer death itself. "I'm absolutely speechless, and I know you are too." Kimberly's transformation into the Moonborn, her sacrifice and rebirth, the defeat of Margaret's shadow magic, this has been an incredible journey. If this story touched your heart the way it touched mine, please subscribe and share it with someone who believes in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. And tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? Or did Kimberly's transformation surprise you as much as it surprised me? The Moonborn story may be complete, But something tells me this is just the beginning of Kimberly and Kieran's legendary love story. The New Dawn. 6 months after the blood debt challenge that changed everything, Kimberly stood on the balcony of the Blackthorn stronghold, watching the sun set over a territory that now encompassed half the continent. Pack after pack had sworn allegiance to the Moonborn Queen and her Alpha King, drawn by the promise of an end to the ancient conflicts that had plagued their kind for centuries. "Regrets?" Kieran asked, sliding his arms around her from behind, their ritual question that had become something of a private joke. Kimberly leaned back against his chest, her silver-tipped fingers intertwining with his, only that it took us so long to get here. She wasn't entirely the same woman who had saved 3 dying pups in the forest. The transformation had left her with abilities that still surprised her daily. She could speak to creatures that had never known language, heal wounds that extended beyond the physical, and sense the flow of magic itself across vast distances. But in the ways that mattered most, she was still Kimberly, still the woman who chose compassion over safety, who would rather risk everything than watch others suffer. "The council meeting went well?" Kieran asked, though he already knew the answer through their bond. "Better than expected. European packs have agreed to the treaty, and the Australian alphas are sending a delegation next month." Kimberly smiled, remembering the looks of wonder on the faces of pack leaders who had spent centuries believing peace was impossible. It turns out people are more willing to listen to reason when you can prove that cooperation makes everyone stronger. A soft knock interrupted them. Vincent appeared in the doorway, wearing an expression that Kimberly had learned meant either very good news or very bad news. "Alpha, Luna," he said with a slight bow. "We've received an interesting message from the Fae courts." Kimberly and Kieran exchanged glances. The Fae had been conspicuously absent from all supernatural politics for the past century, retreating into their own realm and ignoring the growing tensions between other magical communities. "What do they want?" Kieran asked. Vincent's smile was somewhere between amazed and terrified. "To meet the Moonborn. It seems Kimberly's transformation has attracted attention from beings we didn't even know were still aware of our existence." Kimberly felt a familiar flutter of excitement in her chest. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities to heal the rifts that divided their world. It was exhausting and exhilarating, and more fulfilling than anything she could have imagined. "Schedule the meeting," she decided, "but make sure they understand that any negotiations must include protections for all supernatural communities, not just the Fae." Vincent nodded and withdrew, leaving Kimberly and Kieran alone on the balcony as the first stars appeared overhead. "You know," Kieran said thoughtfully, "when I first found you in that forest, I thought I was saving 3 pups." Kimberly turned in his arms, her eyes dancing with mischief. "And instead?" "Instead," Kieran replied, leaning down to brush his lips against hers. Their kiss was interrupted by a familiar yapping sound from the gardens below. Looking down, Kimberly saw 3 magnificent young wolves racing across the courtyard, the princes of Moonridge, alive and healthy and completely free of shadow corruption. Her resurrection had done more than restore her own life. It had undone every bit of damage Margaret's magic had caused, bringing back everyone who had been lost to shadow consumption. The boys had been returned to their grateful pack, but they visited the stronghold regularly, drawn by an unbreakable bond with the woman who had literally brought them back from death. "Aunt Kimberly," Prince Tobias called up to the balcony, his voice clear in the evening air. "Are you coming down for story time?" Kimberly laughed, the sound carrying pure joy across the courtyard. "In a moment." She looked back at Kieran, at the man who had seen worth in her when she couldn't see it herself, who had stood by her through transformation and prophecy and the birth of a new age. "Ready for another adventure?" she asked. Kieran's smile was answer enough. Together, they headed inside to join their extended family, a household that now included rescued wolves, diplomatic guests, reformed rogues, and 3 very spoiled princes who had never forgotten the woman who chose to save them when the whole world said they were beyond hope. As they walked through halls filled with laughter and warmth, Kimberly reflected on how far she had come from that lonely girl who believed kindness was always rewarded. She had been right. In the end, kindness was rewarded. Sometimes the reward just took a little longer to arrive than expected. And sometimes, it came in the form of a love so powerful, it could literally reshape the world. And that, dear listeners, is the story of Kimberly Moreau, the wolfless outcast, who became the Moonborn Queen, the woman who proved that true power comes not from dominance, but from the courage to heal what others would leave broken. If this tale has moved you, if you believe in the magic of second chances and love that conquers all, please subscribe and share Kimberly's story with someone who needs to remember that we all have the power to transform our pain into purpose. Until our paths cross again, remember kindness is always rewarded, even when the reward comes in ways we never imagined possible.